might have noticed that children have a unique and very direct way of looking at things. Their minds are free from the worldly clutter which preoccupies adults. Could this mean that children are more receptive to unworldly phenomena? Some observers believe that they can possess exceptional psychic powers.
Former teacher and psychologist Cassandra Eason's interest in psychic children was triggered by an incident involving her husband John and her young son Jack. The story begins one Sunday morning in 1988.
I'd been up most of the night with a teething baby. We were having breakfast and I was desperately waiting for my husband John to come home from his overnight shift.
Journalist John was doing his usual morning motorbike journey from his London offices to his Reading home, over 40 miles away.
Oh, look at the mess!
We looked at the clock and I thought he'll be home any moment now. Jack looked up from his cornflakes and said,
"Mummy, Daddy's gone rolly boys on his bike, but he's okay."
Eat your breakfast, Jack. God, where is your father?
I was driving home when all of a sudden I just hit this patch of oil. I was trying to slow down and skidded on it and came off it. The bike wasn't too badly damaged. I wasn't too badly damaged either. I just picked myself up and kept driving home.
Sometime after 11, the sound of John's motorbike was outside. I rushed out.
I know what happened. Jack told me.
Just a few cuts and bruises, I'm okay.
Jack told me.
Of course, at that moment, it all fell into place.
I was fairly stunned. I couldn't explain it at the time.
It had turned out that about the time Jack had said what he'd said, John was actually falling off his motorbike.
I tried to work out some sort of logical explanation. It might have been that he was expecting me to have an accident because I had a motorbike and he'd heard about people having motorbike accidents. But I couldn't explain the coincidence of the time that he said it was about the time that I was falling off the bike.
The episode intrigued Cassandra, who began researching children's psychic abilities.
I've come across thousands, not just hundreds, but thousands and thousands of experiences involving children.
Since the incident involving her son, Cassandra has found enough material to write several books on the paranormal, detailing the claims of psychic powers in children.
All children seem to have a latent psychic ability, but it's something that people find frightening because it's not something you can take into a laboratory and weigh or measure.
So what is the scientist's view? David Marks is a professor of psychology at Middlesex University.
It wouldn't surprise me if we found more psychic reports from children than from adults, but I would suggest that this is bound up with their very fantasy-prone personalities.
Fantasy, perhaps. But that can't explain what happened to 7-year-old Erin Solomon, who seems to have premonitions about her family's cats.
Erin woke up one morning and she'd had a dream about Zach, our cat. She dreamt that he was killed. He was killed in her dream.
There was this girl and she kicked Zach into the river and then someone found his body in the river and then I woke up and I thought Zach was dead. I ran into my mum's room and I told my mum about my dream and she says he isn't dead, he's still alive, it's all right, it was only a dream.
Then a few days after that, we realised Zach was missing. He didn't come in for his usual feed and things. So I contacted the vet and they said that they had found a cat that fitted Zach's description. When I realised the dream had come true about Zach, we remembered that she'd had other dreams about previous 2 cats that we had.
I had a dream about my cat Rance had a dream about my mum had a party and they dropped a penny on the floor, and my nanny told Jasmine to pick up the penny, and before Ramp swallowed it, and she swallowed it, and it got stuck in her throat and she died.
Within a few days of Erin's dream, Ramps died. Erin also dreamt that a third cat they had, called Gandhi, died. Within 2 days, he too had passed away.
When we realised that she was having these dreams and the cats were then dying within a short period of time after the dreams, we did realise that this was quite strange.
Many parents will be familiar with their young child having an imaginary friend whom only they can see and communicate with. Some children claim they're talking to a dead relative, perhaps someone they've never even met. 13-year-old Nicholas Mason from Wolverhampton believes he's contacted regularly by his dead granddad.
My father was an amazing character. He was very, very well loved by everybody, and I can close my eyes now and I can see his face clearly. When I told my father that I was pregnant, he was thrilled to bits, and when it was a boy, he was the very first grandchild in the family. He wouldn't put him down. They were very, very close, and after my father died, Nick, to say that he was only 3.5 when my dad died, he missed him terribly.
He really cared for me. He took me everywhere, took me to the park, out, shopping, got me nice stuff.
After his death, Nicholas felt his granddad still talked to him. His mother didn't think too much of it. It seemed a comfort to Nicholas. But then when the family car, once owned by Nicholas's granddad, was stolen, something happened that no one could explain.
It got to about mid-afternoon and Nicholas was playing with his friends on the green, and he suddenly came up to me and he said,
Mum, I know where the car is.
What do you mean you know where the car is?
Granddad told me.
Now, I always believe in listening to a child. So I said, all right then, where's the car? And with that, he goes off into the corner of the garden, and I can see him nodding his head and shaking his head and listening and thinking. And then he came back and he says, Grandad says you know where the car is, Mum.
Granddad said he was next to these 2 bridges.
What do you mean 2 bridges?
2 bridges that you could go over and under.
Do you mean Bridge North?
No, not Bridge North. It's where we used to have picnics.
24 hours later, police found the stolen car abandoned by the thieves 7 miles away. Roseanne was asked to pick it up.
Mum, there's a car, and there's 2 bridges, just like Grandad said.
When we found the car in the exact place that Nick had described, I was absolutely thrilled to bits. To me, it was proof what Nick had told me had actually happened.
The car was parked next to 2 bridges, near a picnic spot, just as Nicholas said his granddad had told him.
If he'd have said something like that after the car was found, Grandad told me it was going to be found in that place, then yes, there'd have been a lot of doubt. But he told me before the car was found.
So how do scientists explain claims that children can talk to dead relatives who give them information they couldn't possibly know? Coincidence is one explanation.
I think to a scientist we can explain it in terms of the children's imagination, which is extremely vivid.
But is there a darker side to some children's apparent psychic abilities? Could it in fact be harmful? The Church believes it can. The Reverend Tom Willis is a Church of England exorcist. He is called in, usually by distraught parents, to exorcise demons they believe are possessing their child.
Exorcism is part of the Church's healing ministry, which has been revived a lot in recent years.
Reported cases of children being possessed by spirits have risen steadily since the abolition of the Witchcraft Act in 1952, a repeal which decriminalised practising the occult.
Since then, a lot more people have dabbled in our generation in the occult, in seances and Ouija boards and astrology and tarot cards, and the Church has to mop up the results of all this. There has been an increase in the number of people asking for this ministry, and the number of children involved has also increased.
Reverend Willis has exorcised many children who he believes were possessed by evil spirits.
Well, I recently had a case of a young child of 3 who was swearing and blaspheming, and they knew the child couldn't have learnt this and said, "Who's telling you all this?" And she said, "The old man that comes into my room, He says these words. And eventually when we prayed for the repose of the soul of this chap and blessed the house, they moved house and they say now there's no more problems.
Are these genuine cases of spirits possessing children with psychic abilities, or is there a more mundane explanation?
Children can believe sometimes that they're possessed, so can adults, but in children it's very, very vivid. There are much more rational explanations. For example, a child has a dream that they are being possessed by some sort of spirit. They wake up the next morning, they're very frightened by this. They tell their parents, and the parents panic and contact the local priest. The priest comes along. He may himself believe in spirits. He then reinforces the belief in the child, and they go through an exorcism. But really here what we've got is a medieval story, a medieval fairy tale to explain and interpret complicated experiences.
Well, whether or not kids are psychic, one thing's for sure. They do have special powers to wrap you around the little fingers. Good night.